Good evening, ladies and gents. I believe we're live now. It's Wednesday, time for another PMQ this evening. How you doing in the chat, which is open as always, of course. You do have to subscribe to post in the chat. It'll take just 60 seconds after you subscribe, if you've not subscribed already, to add your questions, comments, etc. in the chat. Please do keep it civil as always. I do my best to keep up with the chat as we go along with live streams. No moderators at the moment, but let us know how you're doing. Just looks like I'm having a couple of connection problems at the moment. Bear with, if you can hear me. Just checking some of the settings now. I'll be right with you. Just want to make sure I'm coming through nice and smooth. Let us know in the chat how the connection is, if you are hearing me. Might be a little bit of buffering. Apologies about that. I'll try and work on that as we go through the stream. And I'll be taking a quick look at a developing news story I'm sure you've heard of about this attempted assassination of the Slovakian head of state, which is still a developing story. Just before we go into PMQs, going to be taking a quick look at that. I've had my eye on that story all day at the moment. He is receiving surgery, as he has been for some hours now, but I'll keep you posted on that as we go through. And just before we go and see Keith in the lounge, I just want to give a quick shout out to all of the members, old and new, whether you're watching live or on a replay. Thanks a lot for showing solidarity by joining as members, and special thanks to those who've recently gifted memberships to other viewers as well. That's a great way to support the channel. Wondergut, thanks for joining us in the chat. Hope you're well this evening. Connection's all good. Yeah, back on excellent connection now, according to YouTube. So thanks a lot for confirming that. So, as I was saying, here's a quick list of all of our members, including those who joined us yesterday on the rescheduled weekly live stream. So big shout out to everybody whose names you'll see appearing here. Alright, so yeah, massive shout out to everybody whose names you saw there. If you'd like to join that list, I'll be playing members credits during and at the end of live streams and videos as well. So please do consider supporting the channel in that way. Also, hit the thumbs up button if you've not done so already. Helps this stream reach a wider and broader audience. Thanks so much for those of you who've subscribed recently as well. And please do check out some of the other video content on the channel as well. Lefty's Pragues, hellos to you too. Hope you're very well this evening. Let us know how you're doing. Right, so I quickly want to take a look at this developing story. Obviously this is pretty big news. A head of state, an EU member state as well, and this assassination attempt does seem politically motivated. That's why I'm bringing it up, of course.
Shot. I don't fucking believe this. Could everyone stop getting shot?
There we go, sorry. Not sure how long the sound was off for there. Bit of a problem with the microphone. Apologies about that. I was just saying briefly I won't go into FICO's political affiliations with groups and individuals. There's quite a bit of controversy, shall we say, over some of the people he's affiliated with. But a lot of the media today have certainly been speculating that his stance on the war in Ukraine might have had something to do with these political motivations. But that is a whole other kettle of fish. These are just the latest details, so check out that story if you want more on that. Before we dive into PMQs itself, just wanted to bring you that quick update. So off we go, and of course, as always, this is my initial reaction. I've not seen PMQs, I've not seen any clips or snippets of it either. This is a genuine reaction from myself. There's Hoyle waiting and ready to go. And we'll bring up the scoreboard. Of course, every week we keep count of how many times Sunak says stop the boats, and how many times it's mentioned that Keir Starmer is a lawyer and was former director of public prosecutions. So last week was a bit of a thrashing, a 4-1 in favour of stop the boats. We'll see what transpired, I should say, in today's session. Just a quick reminder as well, if you're watching back on a replay, please do add your comments. Let us know your thoughts as you go. Do my best to keep up with comments on all of our content. Right then, question number 1. Mr. Speaker.
Now come to Prime Minister's questions. Jonathan Lord.
Question number 1, Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, this morning I had meetings with ministerial colleagues and others. In addition to my duties in this House, I shall have further such meetings later today.
Jonathan Lord.
Residents across the eastern villages of Woking in Byfleet, West Byfleet and Purford have seen a large number of proposed developments over recent years. Of particular concern is an area of beautiful fields near West Hall, where over 1,000 of my constituents have written back to me in recent weeks expressing their deep concerns about the lack of provision of local infrastructure and the potential effects on the local environment. My residents and I will fight on, but does the Prime Minister agree with me that Labour's proposals to concrete over vast swathes of the Greenbelt in Surrey and the South East would be a complete calamity?
Well, Mr. Speaker, my honourable friend is absolutely right. Unlike actually both the Liberal Democrats and the Labour Party, who believe in top-down targets that would decimate the Greenbelt, we believe in local.
Is he going to pretend that he cares about the environment?
Which is why we are making sure that we make best use of brownfield land and ensuring that we conserve and enhance our precious countryside for generations to come.
We now come to Leader of the Opposition, Keir Starmer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On Monday, the Prime Minister treated us to his 7th relaunch in 18 months. He vowed to take on the dangers that threaten the country. So it was good to see the Minister for Common Sense immediately take up that mantle by announcing a vital crackdown on the gravest of threats, colourful lanyards. Meanwhile, in the real world, after 14 years of Tory government, the prison system is in chaos. Does the Prime Minister think that his decision to let prisoners out 70 days early makes our country more secure?
Well, Mr. Speaker, civil service impartiality is an important principle that we're right to support, but perhaps he could ask his Chief of Staff about that. But actually on Monday, what I did do is outline the serious security threats that our country faces from an axis of authoritarian states. Russia poisoning people on our streets, China targeting our democracy, Iranian who voted to scrap our nuclear deterrent. It's clear that you simply can't trust Labour with our country's security.
Well, I appreciate he's been busy on the front line of the war against lanyards, but it must.
This is what it's boiled down to now. Two Tories arguing about who spends the most on military spending. Both of them have gone the same way on that. Starmer offered him an open goal there to throw that one at him, to be fair, coming in with that question about well, heavier policing and national security, which is, again, pandering to the same kind of voters and members of the electorate that Rishi Sunak has. Quite interesting and telling that he used that as his opening gambit in this one. Carry on, Keith. You big pile of drivel.
Have missed this. I was the first to call for 2.5% on defence spending. The last time it happened was under the last Labour government, but it needs a credible plan, not his fantasy economics. But I am disappointed to see that version 7.0 of his time in office doesn't extend as far as answering questions or giving any information on those prisoners he is releasing early. Basic details like how many, where are they, what crimes have they committed? So will he at least guarantee that none of the criminals he is instructing prisoners to release early are considered high risk?
Mr. Speaker, there are strict eligibility criteria in place with exclusions based on public safety, and no one would be put on the scheme if they were deemed a threat to public safety. But he talks about 2.5%, Mr. Speaker. So if he does think it is important, as I think he just actually stood up and acknowledged that it was the right thing to do, we've got a fully funded plan to actually deliver an increase in defence spending, and it's him and his party who have refused to match that commitment.
Was, of course, only a matter of time before he said plan or deliver long-term plan. Still waiting for a stop the boats or any reference to Starmer being a lawyer. 0-0 still at the moment. Feel free to place your predictions on the scores in the chat as well. If you actually get it right, I'll give you a shout out on the stream as well. There are no prizes for this. It's just a game. It's not a contest or a competition, by the way.
Commitment.
Just like his £46 billion fully funded. If anyone was looking for the perfect metaphor for this shambolic government, we saw it on Monday. The Prime Minister woke up deciding his latest rebrand was Mr. Security. But within hours, the Tory party was being investigated for accidentally publishing.
That's pretty rich from the guy who did so many relaunches himself. There almost seemed to be one a week with a new clarion call, despite the fact that he said that they weren't the party of slogans. You remember that? And, well, that's just pure hypocrisy there from Starmer. He's had more number one priorities than he's had hot dinners as well every time he'd do one of these relaunches. Whatever was the issue in question, the issue of the time will always be his number one priority. He's been through scores of them.
The personal details of hundreds of people. Mr. Speaker, he must be the only tech brother on the continent who can't work a debit card or send an email. But he's not answered my question, so I'll try it again. Are any of the prisoners...
They're really milking that slip up. I mean, it was a bit embarrassing, but...
Mr. Speaker, he just showed spectacularly why he's just not fit to lead this country into the future. This country has a proud tradition of leading the world. We led the world when it came to the Industrial Revolution. Oh. But if he was around, he would have probably called James
Off he goes
Ford
again.
the steam bro, Mr. Speaker. And what we're doing is preparing the country for the future. But when he talks about the prison scheme, let me be crystal clear, no one would be put on the scheme.
He's been reduced to, as he was in that awful scaremongering speech earlier on in the week, he's been reduced to trying to claim credit for things that happened well over 150 years ago, or began to happen 150 years ago. What he considers to be achievements of the country as well. Very strong emphasis on nationalism in all of this, of course. You know that he's trying to appeal to a certain group of society when he's saying things like this. But he can't look back at the last decade and a half and gloat about the Tories' record on anything. He's got to try and appeal to people's sense of patriotism once more as the barrel gets scraped to the very edges of its bottom on the way to the general election, which should be interesting. And Odin Allfather, thanks for joining us in the chat. You're quite right there. The next two elections are going to be very interesting. We've got to be realistic. There's quite a low percentage chance that a socialist party would be successful in gaining a majority at the next election. However, the way the political wind is blowing will be very interesting. We also, obviously, I'm encouraging, as always, socialist independent, socialist grassroots parties to do well. Hope the SNP continue to do well in Scotland, of course. And, well, it's a damn shame that we've already had to wait 5 years since the last general election, where there was a chance of getting a socialist in. And then we probably have to wait a further 10 now. And that was quite apparent to me when Keith first got in, that what looked like a decent chance of gaining a genuine democratic socialist government was blown away. And we only get an election every 5 years. It's a very slow process, and that's why every election matters. That's why every vote counts.
If they were deemed a threat to the public, offenders are subject...
Or not quite under first past the post, but you get my meaning.
...to the toughest of licensing conditions, and if those conditions are broken, they are back in prison for considerably longer. But what's his record on this? He voted against tougher sentences for violent criminals. He actually opposed new powers for the police to tackle violent crime, voted against new laws that have arrested 1,000 criminal people smugglers. The message is crystal clear. He can't be trusted to keep this country safe.
I appreciate that all this rebranding is taking all of his time, but he may want to read the recent inspection report into Lewis Prison. On this topic, I've asked him twice about. It documents, page 5, high-risk prisoners being released at short notice without sufficient planning. Page 46, a high-risk prisoner had his release date brought forward, despite a history of stalking, domestic abuse and a restraining order. Their words, he was a risk to children. Does the early release of stalkers, domestic abusers and those considered a risk to children sound like the work of someone who is making the country more secure?
Mr. Speaker, as I've said, no one should be put on this scheme if they are a threat.
He's really wasting his questions again this week, Starmer.
It does not apply to anyone serving a life sentence, anyone convicted of a serious violent offence, anyone convicted of terrorism, anyone convicted of a sex offence, and crucially, in contrast to the system that Labour had put in place, Mr. Speaker, governors in the prison service have an
A lot of this is surrounding news that basically the prisons are full, and there have been recent reports about the state conditions of prisons such as Wandsworth, which are truly shocking, and they're trying to they're not doing a very good job about it, but they're trying to address those problems and those revelations here today. Both trying to stick their chests out and act as though they'd be the toughest on crime. When Starmer had a chance to move on to some actual real social issues instead of just arguing over this particular one. What can you say? Right, let's crack on.
absolute lock so that no one is put on the scheme who shouldn't be. But thankfully, Mr. Speaker, their scheme let out thousands upon thousands of violent offenders onto our streets, and even 2 terrorists. Thankfully, we've toughened up sentencing against those criminals with new legislation, but he voted against it, Mr. Speaker.
Well, I'm glad to hear that those on life sentences aren't being released early, and he may not think that releasing domestic abusers is a problem. But Labour has repeatedly called for domestic abusers to be exempt from his scheme to release prisoners early. His government has shamefully ignored those calls. So now we have the evidence that domestic abusers are being released early. The Lewis report, Prime Minister. Will he finally change course and back Labour's calls?
Mr. Speaker, as I've been crystal clear, there is an absolute governor lock on people who are put on the scheme. And in contrast to the last Labour scheme, prisoners were let out with no supervision, no electronic tags. In fact, 80,000 offenders were let out. 16,000 were violent, Mr. Speaker, leading to multiple murders committed. We fixed that system. But when it comes to this question, not only are we building the biggest prison programme in history, we're also deploying rapid deployment cells. And, Mr. Speaker, because on this side of the House, we understand the importance of prison. Unlike one of his frontbenchers who said, and I said, who quote, "Prison doesn't prevent crime."
If you're so enthusiastic about it, why don't you go there where you belong? Seeing as you're both complicit in an occupation, and well, the man on your screens is, Starmer would still be going in the same direction if he were on the opposite side of the floor, on the opposite benches. And yeah, that's a matter of fact. So careful what you wish for, Rishi. You might be joining Bibi in the clink. Well, you know, if there were any real justice, of course.
It's always the same with the Labour Party: soft on crime and soft on criminals.
He's literally letting criminals out early. Mr. Speaker, the only answer to the question I asked, whether domestic abusers should be exempt from his early release scheme from anyone serious about security, is yes. Perhaps the most ludicrous part of the Prime Minister's speech on Monday was when he said he won't accept the idea that any of the problems people are facing are caused by the 14 years of Conservative government. He won't say how many prisoners they've released early. He won't say if they're burglars, abusers or stalkers. He won't say where they are or what support their victims are getting. Yet he
And now it's turned into, yeah, as you're saying, Odin, a bit of a pantomime and scaremongering contest now. This is all that they've got. Fear, division, and trying to spread this paranoia with many sprinklings of xenophobia mixed in there as well. Very pantomime, very tragic, very tragic. I have to say the exchanges 5 years ago in the run-up to the last election were a lot more engaging than what we see between Sunak and Starmer. But let's see, it's still 0-0. I'm surprised that Keith hasn't slipped out a little, when I was Director of Public Prosecutions.
thinks he has the right to tell people they can't blame his government for any of it. Doesn't he think that rather than confiscating lanyards like some jumped-up milk monitor, he should stop issuing get-out-of-jail cards free to prisoners considered a risk to children?
Mr. Speaker, another week with no ideas and absolutely no plan for the country. They've had 14 years to think about nothing but the future, but all they can do is talk about the past, Mr. Speaker. But I am surprised because...
That's rich. Sorry, I'm just eating a biscuit. That's rich. Coming from Sunak, who generally, and he probably... there's a decent chance of him doing so again. Excuse me. Later on in this session, bringing up the ridiculous scam And the fact that Jeremy Corbyn still lives rent-free in his head, as he does Starmer's, really makes that statement from Sunak just that extra bit rich there. He's had 14 years, and all he's done is try to say that he's changed the party. This is Keith, who I'm referring to here. But it's now gone so far right that it's appealing to Tories, and we saw a couple of defections within a fortnight of each other from Tories to Labour. So, case in point.
What he didn't bring up that has happened in the last week since we met is that statistics confirm that we have now had the joint fastest growth rate in the G7 this year, Mr. Speaker. The Bank of England said that the economy had turned a corner. Ian Wise said our growth was impressive. The chief economist of the Independent Office for National Statistics said the economy is going gangbusters, Mr. Speaker. Now, the Shadow Chancellor may want to copy and paste their comments into her next speech. Or does she think they're all gaslighting the British public too?
No way. No way. Well, that's what narcissism is, really. Accuse others of what they're culpable of themselves. Starmer is, of course, trying to gaslight the British public, but that's a bit rich coming from Sunak. Very, very rich indeed, in fact.
You gotta be fucking kidding.
Oh, wow. Wow. Let's crack on. I hope they get to Stephen Flynn soon, as always.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. While I understand the need to upgrade our broadband infrastructure, it cannot be right that a company called Brisk is proposing to erect telegraph poles in the Squirrels estate in Hayley Green in my constituency. So, would the Prime Minister agree with me that residents are 100% opposed to these proposals, and they go against the guidance? So would the Prime Minister agree with me that they should abandon these proposals, that they should that we should have a review of permitted development rights in relation to this type of infrastructure, and he should
even the Tories are talking over him. I know he's, coming from the backbenches. James Morris, the member from Hales Owen and Rowley Regis, wherever that may be, can't recall off the top of my head. But they're even heckling their own ministers at this point. Is it getting that bad? Is it getting that factional? Will we see another leadership challenge before the next election? Who knows?
He should give Ofcom greater power to investigate breaches.
Well, can I thank my honourable friend for rightly championing the views of his constituents on this important topic. Network operators have to follow legal obligations when deploying their networks, and Ofcom can in fact investigate reports of failure to follow these obligations. And I know that the Minister...
You've got Tories that host news shows. You've got Rees-Mogg, who'd be over Sunak's left shoulder somewhere as we look at him on GB News. You want to talk about Ofcom? Honestly, this is the party who made a fake statistic Twitter page or what's the word I'm looking for? A verification page, and debunking fake news verification kind of Twitter page that was made straight from Tory HQ. You want to talk about Ofcom Sunak? Really?
For digital infrastructure has met the sector and Ofcom recently to raise concerns about reports of poor pole sighting, asked operators to share infrastructure, and I will ask her specifically to provide my honourable friend with a more detailed update.
Leader Stephen Flynn.
Mr. Speaker,
Finally.
on Monday the Prime Minister outlined what he considers to be extremist threats to our society, and in doing so he actively compared North Korea, Iran and Russia with those people in Scotland who believe in independence. So can I ask him to rise once to the standards befitting of his office and apologise for those puerile and pathetic remarks?
I
Mr.
severely
Speaker,
doubt he will.
that's not what I said, but I would say to the honourable gentleman that his party is indeed a threat to the integrity of the United Kingdom. And I hate to remind him, but that's literally their entire purpose, Mr. Speaker, because when the people of Scotland accepted the referendum in 2014, it was the SNP who didn't. They went on creating a Minister for Independence, focused on constitutional wrangling, ignoring the needs of the people. Education standards falling, taxes rising. So actually, finally, he should do the right thing.
It was almost 50-50. That's hardly decisive whatsoever. That was 10 years ago.
What the Prime Minister did was not just equate my colleagues and I to despotic and dangerous despots across the world. He proactively compared almost half of the Scottish population with a war criminal like Vladimir Putin. And he did so as their Prime Minister, as the man who represents them on the world stage and the man who on these isles is tasked with defending their liberties and their democracy. Now, we know that his sorry time in office is rapidly coming to a conclusion. Is this really how he wants to be remembered?
Mr. Speaker, as ever, distracting from the actual record of what the SNP are doing in Scotland. And this obsession with independence means that Scottish schoolchildren are being let down, plummeting down international league tables. The Scottish NHS, the only place in the United Kingdom where funding is actually falling in real terms, and taxes going up.
Do you remember that time when all we heard from the Tory party was independence for 4 years? Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will the Prime Minister join me in congratulating Uxbridge College, who have recently entered into a pioneering partnership with the Massachusetts Institute of Technology? This is groundbreaking work for the field for the further education sector, and it's going to have great benefits for local businesses and local students, for the education sector and for the local economy.
Well, I join my honourable friend in congratulating Uxbridge College and the West London Institute of Technology for their collaboration with MIT. This is equipping students with the skills of the future and that local businesses require. And that's very much the story of this government, Mr. Speaker. The biggest long-term settlement for post-16 education in this country in years. A proud record of creating over 5.5 million...
Lies. Cuts. All across the board.
The opposite wants to halve the number of apprenticeships and put a brake on people's aspirations.
Roberts.
Fucking kidding.
Okay. My party, Plaid Cymru, has secured a crucial win for our farmers as Labour in Wales are forced to pause the sustainable farming scheme. We've done our bit for farmers. Now it's time the Prime Minister did his. Harmful trade deals and Brexit checks are hitting our world-famous Welsh lamb and beef. Will he, therefore, guarantee to Welsh farmers that he will never again sign a deal that threatens their interests?
Well, perhaps...
It's too late now. At the moment, that ship has sailed, and these are the consequences. These are the consequences that you have to face. There's no point asking Sunak if he regrets leaving the European Union. You know what he's going to say about that. Although no doubt here he's going to produce some rhetoric which tries to make him appear that he cares about British farmers, which is very far removed from the truth, of course.
Mr. Speaker, if the Honourable Lady cared about Welsh farmers, she should stop propping up the Welsh Labour government. And it was actually the work of the Welsh Conservatives that ensured that there was a spotlight on the Labour government's proposals in Wales, which would have led to thousands of job losses, less food security for our country, and destroyed rural incomes. Farmers rightly described it as bleak, damaging and shocking, just like the Labour Party's approach to rural Britain.
Mr. Speaker, Barnet Hospital A&E is expanding. Finchley Memorial Hospital has had its diagnostics hub boosted by new equipment, and there are more appointments in general practice locally than there were before the pandemic, but I still have constituents who are waiting too long for NHS care. So can I urge the Prime Minister to redouble his efforts to grow the NHS workforce and get waiting times down?
I'm delighted to hear about the new Community Diagnostic Centre in my honourable friends local.
He won't. Of course he won't. Of course he won't. They've absolutely savaged the NHS. It's been stripped bare over the last decade and a half. It almost faced collapse during the COVID pandemic, of course.
Local hospital, and we are working tirelessly to reduce the overall NH waiting list, which has come down by around 200,000 since September of last year, and that is an achievement in light of the pressures from industrial action. But she's right, there's more to do, which is why our productivity plan will free up clinicians to spend more time with patients, and, to her point, our long-term plan for the NHS will ensure that we train more doctors and more nurses to meet the workforce requirements the NHS has for the future.
Richard Bergen.
Yeah, the Oscar goes to someone else, Rishi.
30,000 Palestinian deaths, not enough to move this Prime Minister to end arms sales to Israel. The killing of British aid workers, not enough to move the Prime Minister to end arms sales. It even seems that, unlike the US, an all-out assault on Rafah with all the death and destruction that would entail wouldn't be enough. So just what on earth?
This is a rare yet very good side of Labour MP bringing this up in PMQs recently. It's been members of the SNP, Caroline Lucas as well, for example, recently, with the few genuine socialists left in the Labour Party. This is seldom seen, so it is a positive. I think on the whole, Richard Bergen is one of the better Labour MPs that are left, of course, but you can count those on your fingers these days.
Would be enough to finally move this Prime Minister into the same position as the majority of the British public and end arms sales to Israel.
Mr. Speaker, I just point out to the honourable gentleman that the UK government does not directly sell arms to Israel, unlike...
But we would sell them to America knowing that they were going to go to Israel, certainly. For example, there's only a few different ways that Rishi Sunak responds to this question and tells whoever is asking it in his own particular idiom to go fuck themselves. And this is one of them. First of all, deny that it's happening under some form of technicality. The other one is to deflect and try to say that current trading between UK and Israel, be it directly or by proxy or by third party, nothing's going to change. Also, the other one, when it comes to the question of UK complicity in terms of legality with this situation in Israel and Palestine, between Israel and Palestine, I should say, is basically to say that there are inquiries being made and they're looking into ensuring that the UK stays within the law. That's the only three different responses that he's got whenever these legitimate questions come up, but Parliament not being the place for genuine scrutiny or holding politicians to account. Either he's allowed to waffle on and not be corrected, or told by the Speaker that he's actually got to provide some facts. Phil, welcome to the chat. Thanks so much for those gifted memberships. Thanks a lot. Hope you're well tonight. Hope all you new members enjoy your perks. You can check those out. Just hit the perks button. You should see that underneath the stream. You can find out all the benefits of enjoying those gift memberships. Thanks again, Phil. So John Serrano, Ryan C, Davinia Robbins, Hugh Allen, Alex Burt, Andrew Johnson, Just a Person, Gershu, and Spill the Tea, as well as Arwen. Hope you all enjoy those perks. Thanks for showing solidarity in that way, Phil. Let us know how you're doing this evening in the chat. Thanks for joining us.
Unlike the US, and nor does the UK government offer any military lethal aid packages to Israel as the US does. So he should not conflate these issues. As part of the government's robust arms control regime, we do regularly review advice to ensure compliance with international law, and ministers act in accordance with that advice. Our position with regard to export licenses, as he knows, is unchanged following the most recent assessment, and it is indeed in line with other partners, including the United States.
Now, I think just a reminder that this is my first viewing of this. My genuine reaction, I think that was more or less a slam dunk there. I could have almost told you in verbatim what Sunak was going to say, and lo and behold, he just more or less said it in slightly different phrasing, of course. It shows how predictable he is on the issue. That's all it is. Venusian Teapots, welcome back to another live stream. Hope you're well tonight as well. Hey up, how's thee? Hope you're very well. Let us know how you're doing in the chat as well. Just a quick reminder to everybody, hit the thumbs up button. Feel free to share this on your social media and hit buttons, etc. Thanks a lot to all of you for joining us tonight.
As a member of the Commonwealth War Graves Commission, I was delighted that the Prime Minister found time yesterday to ignite the light of liberation at the start of its journey to Normandy to commemorate sacrifices made for the liberation of Europe. Will my right honourable friend join me this War Graves week in confirming that standing up to tyrants who bring about war in Europe is as much in our national interest today as it was 80 years ago?
Oh, I'm sorry, Philip. I'm sorry, Philip Dunn. I think you'll find that Germany had a right to defend itself there, didn't it? Just like another country in the Middle East is currently doing, according to you.
Well, can I thank my honourable friend for his work as...
I'm not making light of the tremendous sacrifices made by people in this country during World War II there, by the way. Of course, my family, my predecessor, my, what's the word I'm looking for? In my lineage, my grandparents, great-grandparents, etc., fought in both World Wars, so just a quick reminder that I'm not making light of that, just pointing out a bit of hypocrisy, of which you'll find plenty amongst these lot. Looks like Penny Mordaunt's noticed a wasp on the back of Sunak's head there, just where I've paused it. It's quite novel to see her expressing some form of interest. She normally just stares at a phone, looking as though she doesn't want to be there. I can't even remember the last time I saw her speaking at the dispatch box or during PMQs, for example. Other than a quick nod or whatever. But she certainly seems to have woken up a bit.
As a commissioner on the Commonwealth War Graves Commission, and he raises an important point about authoritarian states with different values to ours becoming increasingly assertive. So it is right that we build...
Oh no, she's gone straight back to the did I leave the iron on face. She does need to stand up and fight. That's quite right, Venusian Teapot. She's certainly lost a lot of that vim. She was all full of piss and vinegar when she made that statement. And now look at her. She looks like her team's just lost 7-0 at home. Right, I've interrupted far too much in the last 5 minutes. I'll carry on.
Build our security in uncertain times, defending and protecting our country, our values and our interests. That's why we've made the generational decision to increase our defence spending, and it's crystal clear that it's only the Conservative Party that can be trusted with our nation's security.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. On the 2nd of June, the Leavenmouth Railway reopens after years of community campaigning. But just at that point, TSB have announced that they are closing their Leven Bank branch. Loss of banks, hollow out communities, and they're an impediment to small businesses as well. Now, Cash Access UK have said that they're going to roll out 100 by the end of the year banking hubs, and FCA are consulting. But can the Prime Minister accept that the government has been too slow on this, and what else is he going to do to prevent these banking deserts from emerging?
Well, Mr Speaker, as I've said repeatedly from this dispatch box, it's imperative that banks and building societies recognise the needs of all customers, including those who still need to use in-person cash services, and that's why we legislated to protect access to cash as part of the Financial Services and Markets Act, and as a result, customers can access cash and banking services through a wide range of channels, including post offices, ATMs, telephone and other services, but including community initiatives like banking hubs.
Alberto Costa.
Double child rapist and murderer Colin Pitchfork is yet again having another parole hearing in the next few weeks. As well as the brutal murders this man exposed.
Now, the cases that he's referring to here are, of course, shocking, but we've already done that bit during this session. They've done the standoff, the who will make the bigger police state, who's best for national security. It's certainly the running theme of this session so far, and he's dragging it back to these cases where the Tories are saying that people were released too early. I mean, change the frigging record. How much of this session is actually going to be focusing on that and this fear mongering? I guess they've just really smashed the button on that one, following Sunak's speech earlier in the week to try and give it some more validity. These are going to be the main tools that you're going to see in the run-up to the election, of course, as well as the completely fabricated, phony bullshit war on woke and the ongoing xenophobia with Sunak's Rwanda policy, which I'm surprised hasn't been brought up yet. We still sit at 0-0 on the scores. We'll see if perhaps we get a late winner as we go through the rest of the session.
Exposed himself to over 1,000 girls and women. Now, as MP for South Leicestershire, I distributed a constituency-wide survey asking my constituents about parole board reform. Because the problem, Mr Speaker, is that the reconsideration mechanism rules allow Mr Pitchfork to keep asking for a reconsideration of a reconsidered decision, limitless times and cost-free to him. So, can I ask the Prime Minister if he will arrange a meeting between myself and the Justice Secretary to discuss necessary changes to the reconsideration mechanism rules, and will he arrange for me to be able to deliver the findings of the survey where thousands of constituents have responded to his number 10 policy team?
Can I commend my honourable friend, the member for South Leicestershire, for his tireless campaigning about this case. And I know that the whole House will join me in recognising the horror of the crimes committed by Colin Pitchfork and sending our condolences to the victims' families. Now, we are reforming the parole system to add a ministerial check on the release of the most dangerous criminals and changing the law so that society's most depraved killers' life means life. But I will, of course, arrange for the findings of my honourable friend's survey to be properly considered and will ensure that he meets with the Justice Secretary to discuss his proposals further.
Rosanna Allen-Khan.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. In Gaza, Israel has attacked hospitals, it's attacked refugee camps, and it has killed aid workers. Israel has blocked vital aid, turned off water supplies, and denied access to food. Israel has killed thousands upon thousands of innocent civilians as the world watches, trampling all over international humanitarian law. No other country would be allowed to act with such impunity. So, can the Prime Minister tell me why he allows Israel to get away with it unchallenged, and why he continues to act as a bystander to such horror?
Wonderful points, wonderful question, of course. That's, again, a bit more positive. That's the second time we've seen this manage to be brought up by a Labour MP as well. Just to refer you back to what I said earlier about how I'm sure Sunak will respond to this in one of those three different ways. I'm sure that Keith and Reeves on the front bench there were sitting pretty uncomfortably as they heard that question coming from the Labour, the shadow backbenches.
Well, Mr. Speaker, well, we do support, and I do support Israel's right to defend itself and remove the threat that Hamas, the terrorist organisation, poses to its people. But I am also deeply concerned.
No country has the right to level its neighbouring country to the ground, practically, in search of anyone, any group, any organisation, be they a political group, a militant faction, whatever it might be. No country has that right. It is very clearly, strictly against international law, Sunak. And you know that, but you're just playing dumb and regurgitating Israeli propaganda, which is quite sickening.
About the growing humanitarian crisis in Gaza, and have consistently made that point at this dispatch box and to Prime Minister Netanyahu. We must see further action to ensure more aid gets to people who desperately need it.
Have you heard Sunak condemning the Israeli settlers attacking the trucks coming from Jordan and Egypt, destroying those cargo baggages, the trucks, having the tyres slashed, the contents of the truck spilled out onto the floor, and sugar poured into the fuel tanks? I've not heard any condemnation coming from the Tory benches about that. However, we've seen a continued and pathetic defence of UK arms sales to Israel.
The Rafah and the Kerem Shalom crossing must be open to allow more aid in. We're doing everything we can, trebling our investment, trying to get aid in by land, air and sea, and currently working with allies to build a temporary pier. But she can rest assured that we, on this side of the House, will continue to do everything we can to get support to the people in Gaza who need it.
Absolute load of utter bollocks, and you'll get the same from Keith as well. You're quite right there in the chat, Phil. Thanks a lot for your comment. He doesn't care. He's got complete control of the party. Mandelson, etc., have got complete control over him as well. Yeah, Blair's certainly got a large amount of influence as well. The lobbyists, the LFI, as well. So it's at least 40% of the current shadow cabinet that are affiliated with the LFI. We'll just hear what Keith. We'll just hear what the next question is anyway.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last week, along with apprentices from the nuclear fuel company Urenco, I visited Coleg Menai in Llangefni. The students were excited, but they need certainty about the future of Wilva before they commit to a career in nuclear. Can the Prime Minister confirm when Great British Nuclear will decide if Wilver will be a gigawatt or an SMR site, when my students can expect to see spades in the ground, and when can his brilliant nuclear minister visit Wilver again to announce some good news?
Right. We have a climate crisis, obviously. Clearly, we also have an energy crisis in terms of how much people are getting ripped off on the energy bills, with natural oil and gas being the source of energy which lights and heats people's homes. Do you know, does Sunak know how long it takes to develop a nuclear energy facility, a nuclear power plant, for example? It takes about 20 years. And it's the same for fossil fuels. And that's not going to solve the energy problems of today. What the Tories have done previously is ban onshore wind farms, for example, which, being in the temperate zone that we are, would be a great source of natural and cheap energy that would massively reduce our carbon output. Scotland is running on the vast majority of renewables at the moment. There's no reason why England can't either, with wind and tidal. But there's not as much private profit in that, of course, just purely out of coincidence yet again. She seems, Virginia Crosby, Conservative for Innismon, very pleased with herself, very smug, grinning like a Cheshire cat as she returns to her sedentary position there. And no doubt Sunak thinks he's going to come up with a zinger of a response to that. And thinking that you're pretty clever about asking when spades are going to go in the ground to start the long-winded process of starting a nuclear power plant really just shows how detached from reality these Tories are.
My honourable friend is a tireless campaigner for the Wilver nuclear site in her constituency. Now, she knows that the spring budget, the Chancellor announced that Great British Nuclear has reached an agreement to purchase the site at Wilver, and these and one other site will be vital to achieving our aim of more energy security from nuclear power. Decisions haven't yet been made on the final site to be used, but as ever, she makes a very strong and compelling case for her area.
Look how excited he is. Look how excited he is. It was just a short while ago that he was trying to attack Keith for destroying the green belt with new plans of new development plans. That was more in relation to housing, of course, but whether you're destroying parts of the green belt for one reason or another, trying to criticise that, and they're saying that you're getting excited about where the sites might be. Yeah. What can you say except...
You gotta be fucking kidding.
And as soon as a decision has been made, I know that the Energy Secretary is keen to update her at the earliest opportunity.
Long bailies.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In March,
Now, here we go. Rebecca Long Bailey, MP for Salford. Of course, she has a history of suspension over sharing an article by Maxine Peake. That was just after Keith became party leader. Her suspension is more or less my personal... Well, it was the final straw that brought the camel's back in terms of me cutting my card up as a former Labour campaigner myself. Not heard her speaking in Parliament for a while, so this should be pretty good.
Parliamentary and Health Service Ombudsman's report into 1950s women's state pension injustice made clear to the government that the Department for Work and Pensions was guilty of maladministration, that these women suffered significant injustice, that they were owed compensation, and that Parliament must urgently identify a mechanism for redress. Nearly 279,000 of women have already died waiting for justice. So when will the Prime Minister finally place before this House a mechanism for appropriate redress?
Well, Mr. Speaker, as I said to the House last week, I understand the strong feelings across the Chamber about these matters and the desire for urgency in addressing them. And following the Ombudsman's multi-year investigation, it is imperative that we take the time to thoroughly review the findings, and I'm not entirely sure I agree with her characterisation of all of them so far. But broadly, we are committed to making sure that pensioners have the dignity and security they deserve, including through the triple lock, which is increasing pensions by 900.
Oh, rubbish. This is the party that held women born in the 1950s pensions to ransom unless they continued to work past the planned retirement age. I won't hear such nonsense coming from Sunak. And that's a good point, Phil, in the chat, just going back to the topic of the energy crisis. The Faroe Islands population, 55,000, have made their tidal baseload guaranteed energy twice a day, topped up with wind and solar, on course to become the first fully renewable powered nation. That's fantastic, and you're very right in your other point that any island could do that with the right investment. But yeah, let's give our nuclear friends a contract. Let's exchange brown envelopes under the table and meet in trench coats in underground car parks in the evening to make arrangements, as always.
£100 this year, but I welcome tomorrow's debate on the Ombudsman's report, and we will of course take all views into account as we identify and implement next steps.
Thomas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I know that my right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, takes a personal interest in community pharmacy. Community pharmacists play an essential role in reducing pressure on urgent care services by helping people prevent ill health and managing long-term conditions. Pharmacy First is a good example of government commitment to community pharmacy. However, community pharmacy are under extreme financial pressure, and some are closing, including in St Ives. This year, 177 pharmacies have closed compared to 116 last year. Will my right honourable friend do everything he can to ensure funds are directed towards community pharmacy so that our pharmacy friends can help government to deliver NHS services where and when they are most needed?
Minister. As my honourable friend knows, I do care deeply about the future of our community pharmacies. There are over 10.5 community pharmacies across the country working incredibly hard to serve their patients, and I'm pleased
Oh, sorry, bit of a microphone problem there. Yeah, I was just saying they were going for the world record there in how many times they're saying pharmacy within a minute. Got about 15 or 20 at least so far. I'm trying to be a bit subliminal with the public as well, but they've, you know, decimated that as much as they have. The way they put these planted questions in, and in this instance trying to say that they're shutting things down but not as much as they used to be, is the same as them trying to gloat about there still being inflation. It's just not as high as it used to be. Things are still costing more, you know, in real terms. They're just trying to sweep it all under the carpet. What ridiculous planted question.
That around 80% of people live within a 20-minute walk of a pharmacy, and that's why we're backing them with Pharmacy First, with 600 and...
What if you can't walk? What if you can't... Do you know how short we are as a nation for carers, for people who can't even leave their own homes, for example? You're too busy trying to get them back to work, or threatening cutting off the benefits if they don't go back to work. And they're trying to say that you're helping people with ailments and disabilities. How dare he? How dare he?
And £45 million of extra funding, whereby people can now go and see their pharmacist rather than their GP to get treatments for the 7 most common ailments like ear infections and the like. And this will ensure that not only can they get treatments closer to home, Mr. Speaker, but it will help deliver our plan to cut waiting lists and get people the care they need more quickly.
Linda?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
He said the same thing word for word last week.
Schools have been identified with a structural problem, not rack, with hundreds of pupils now taught off-site. Costs of putting these schools right significantly outweigh the £3.5 million SCA fund for all of North Tyneside. Will the Prime Minister ensure the Department of Education applies the policy that, if it's alerted to significant issues with a building that cannot be managed with local resources, it will provide additional support on a case-by-case basis?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I thank the Honourable Lady for raising the case. As she knows, the Department for Education has provided extensive support.
Sorry, not laughing at these serious issues being brought up. I just think that case-by-case basis is one of the best phrases that you could ask somebody to say in a Tyneside or Wayside accent. On a case-by-case basis. Yeah, sorry. Just minor comedic point. The mind wanders sometimes.
And funding to all those schools that had RAC, which in the end was less than 1%, I think, of all schools that could have been affected. And more generally, given the very significant amounts we're investing in school rebuilding and maintenance, I'm sure that the Education Secretary would have heard her concerns and will write to her in due course.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The clear message from yesterday's Farm to Fork Summit is that food security matters. So as we await today's written statement on ground-mounted solar, can my right honourable friend assure me that the thousands of acres of agricultural land proposed for solar installation in my constituency, from a 2,100-acre installation in the Claydons called Rosefield to smaller but equally destructive ones such as near the village of Kimblewick, now have less chance of getting approved?
Back to the energy crisis as well, you'll note how they'll often dance around the genuine solution of wind and tidal power, as Lefty's Prague has just mentioned in the chat. You saw a great vid about the Faroe Islands. If you do have a link for that, please do let me know, Lefty's Pragues. I'd love to see that. I'm going to check out more about that myself. But just going back to my original point, they'll talk about nuclear, they will talk about solar, they will never bring up the actual solutions except fleetingly and dismissively. It's very easy to promote outrage from consistent Tory supporters with the NIMBY kind of rhetoric, as was coming from Greg Smith there, about solar panel plants being installed. So while they're very quick to attack those solutions that in the UK solar isn't a massive one, it would be a contributor, of course, and more solar panels on roofs, for example, is a good thing. But given the amount of average sunlight that we as a nation generally get, wind and tidal is got to be the main front of attack in terms of reducing CO2 and also people's bills.
Honourable friend is absolutely right to raise this, and particularly at a time of increasing geopolitical risk, we must protect this nation's food security and therefore our most valuable agricultural land.
Oh, and we do have some Geordies in. That's great to see. Wondergupta. Oh, thank you for the comment about did do bad for a try at the accent. Yeah, I'm glad that's what you thought. Cheers for that. Solidarity to everybody up in Tyneside, Wearside, and the Geordies up there.
Now, we can achieve our solar deployment targets and do that on brownfield sites, rooftops, and away from our best farmland. I know he'll look forward to the Energy Secretary's statement later today, which will ensure that we do avoid using our best agricultural land, because like him, I agree that we should be backing British farmers to produce more food. That's good for our country, good for our economy, and good for our food security.
Ellen Morgan.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I've seen for myself the mouldy and damp accommodation that our military families are sometimes forced to live in. So I was disappointed this week to find out that the officer in charge of accommodation wrote to families this month to say that requests for non-urgent repairs are not currently affordable. The Prime Minister has spent this week claiming that defence is a priority. So when is he going to prioritise a safe, warm and decent home for the servicemen and women who put their lives on the line for us?
Well, Mr. Speaker, we're committed to ensuring that our armed forces personnel and their families have safe and well-maintained accommodation. At this point, 96% of service family accommodation meets or exceeds the government's decent home standards, and last year we put aside an extra £400 million investment to improve things. And when issues are reported, the Ministry of Defence has set up a dedicated hotline to ensure that those complaints are investigated by a professional surveyor, and I know that there have been several improvements made specific.
These are the same places that they send asylum seekers as well, of course. This has been brought up before, the appalling conditions that barracks, former barracks, etc., before you even bring up the big Bibi Stockholm thing either. No, those increases in military spending aren't going to go to looking after service personnel or indeed veterans, as they never are. It's just part of the industrial military complex and how much public money can be siphoned off by private weapons contractors. That's the main goal, and that's where the bulk of the money is going to go as well. I suppose they could give it a lick of pain to then say that it was a new one, like they do with the hospitals, but that's just the way the Tories always try and move the goalposts under criticism.
To the accommodation in her area. But again, we are able to continue backing our armed forces personnel and for the job that they do for us, because we are the only party in this place committed to increasing our defence spending.
Mr. Speaker, this week the all-party parliamentary group on birth trauma published our first report called Listen to Mums, Ending the Postcode Lottery on Perinatal Health. This was the first national inquiry by cross-party politicians on this issue, and we received more than 1,300 testimonials from the public. So can I thank the Health Secretary first for attending our report launch on Monday, and I'm delighted she's agreed to our headline recommendation for a national comprehensive maternity strategy to be published by NHS England. So can I ask the Prime Minister to fully back our report and implement all of our recommendations to ensure that all mothers in this country get the aftercare that they deserve?
Well, can I thank the Honourable Member for Stafford for her incredible campaigning on this issue. When we met and discussed, she presented me personally with a copy of this important report, and I'm hugely grateful to her and the APPG on birth trauma for carefully considering the report, and indeed all those brave women who have come forward to share their stories. I'm delighted that the Secretary of State and the NHS CEO both support the overarching recommendation for a comprehensive national strategy to improve maternity services. We will update the House on next steps in due course, but we are fully committed to improving the quality and consistency of care for women throughout pregnancy, birth and the critical months that follow.
Final question, in other words.
Mr. Speaker, when adult rape cases are taking 2 years on average to complete, it's no wonder that 62% of all rape survivors now drop out of the process. When just 2.5% of rapes recorded last year have resulted in a charge, and fewer still will end in conviction, it's no wonder that the Victims Commissioner, Rape Crisis and others have argued that rape has been effectively decriminalised in this country. Is the Prime Minister not ashamed that because of his government's failings, victims and survivors are being put through a living hell in our criminal justice system?
Because of 15 years of Tory cuts, including very deep cuts into the civil service, for example. I mentioned earlier Wandsworth Prison, for example, being full. But also, as well, the court system is completely full up. I heard earlier today about a case where witnesses, police officers, and other people who went to give testimony, obviously, the defendants as well, were turned away at court. The court was dismissed simply for a lack of staff. This has progressively got worse over the last decade and a half. So Starmer's got nothing to say about that, nothing to gloat about on that issue. Mithril, welcome to the chat. Thanks a lot for that super chat. Really hope you're good this evening. It was great to see you yesterday on the stream. How have you been today? Hope you're having a good one. Thanks for joining us as we just get towards the end of this week's PMQs. This could be the final response from Starmer just before we go over a bit more of a broader analysis of this week's session.
Well, Mr. Speaker, while it's right that the Honourable Lady raises this incredibly important topic, I completely disagree with her characterisation of how this government has treated it. It's actually this government previously that introduced the Rape Review Action Plan, which is now showing significant improvements to how we treat rape end to end through the criminal justice system. Violence against women and girls is now a strategic policing requirement for the first ever time. We've rolled out Operation Sorteria so that police forces have the expertise that they need. We've actually quadrupled funding for victim support with more independent domestic sexual...
Well, I don't know if Sunak is aware, but those cases are certainly endemic, and also, very worryingly, seem to be endemic within the Metropolitan Police Force as well. We've heard some absolutely shocking cases recently of abuse of prisoners, murders involving young women, and they really do make your stomach turn when you hear the details of those. So there's clearly not enough being done. There's not enough scrutiny. There is not enough being done in the process of recruitment as well as regulation. But that will always go hand in hand with cuts. You can't have your cake and eat it, Sunak. This is what happens when you cut public funding to the level that the Tories have.
Violence offender advisors. There's a new 24/7 support for victims. We've ended the digital strip search, provided pre-trial cross-examination, all of which, by the way, has meant an improvement in the process, and we have seen an increase in the average sentence to rape by a third since Labour were last in office. And by the way, Mr. Speaker, we did that using a power that her party voted against.
That completes Prime Minister's questions.
Hoyle was very quiet. He didn't interrupt. He's kept his head down quite a lot lately. The sooner we see the back of him, the better. That's for sure. So the main theme of this week's session definitely was along the lines of scaremongering. It descended into pantomime madness once again, as we've seen previously, with this kind of face-off between Starmer and Sunak about who's going to be the strictest on crime, who's going to be doing the most to tackle crime. There was very much a theme of incarceration, prosecution in this session. Although, as I said, it was good to see two Labour members getting up and bringing up the issue of Gaza. But at this stage, you just get those three pre-prepared responses from Rishi Sunak. As always, Stephen Flynn was on point. As always, that was the only question, I believe, about Sunak's comments on Scottish independence supporters. There weren't any other questions from the SNP. We didn't hear from any independents or Greens either this session. We did hear from Plaid Cymru, which doesn't often happen, but Starmer just took that as an excuse, an invitation to attack Welsh Labour. The only thing you're going to get from him is him clearly pointing his attacks at his closest rivals at the moment, the Labour Party. But all of this riding off the back of that really bizarre statement that he made on Monday as well, which was very cringeworthy and embarrassing. I'm sure you'll agree. Another shout out to No Justice as well. I saw that statement for the first time on No Justice's channel recently as well, so please do check out her content if you're not already following or subscribed, any of that business. She's given us quite a few shout outs on the channel recently as well, so very grateful for that also, as well as being grateful for all of your comments, super chats, and also gift memberships this evening. Thanks a lot, you wonderful people. Before we go back into the lounge, I just want to quickly show solidarity with all of our members that we've picked up recently. As I close the scoreboard, that was a 0-0 this week, by the way. Quite a rare occasion that we ran the gauntlet and didn't hear any of those phrases being brought up, but perhaps they'll be making up for that next week. So again, just want to say a big shout out to everybody whose names you'll see on the screen here. Thanks a lot to everybody who's joined and gifted memberships. Also, if you see your name there, I'll update that, of course, to include the new members who we gained tonight. Thanks again, Phil, for that gift membership. And you'll also be able to see your names on every stream and at the end of my long play content as well. That's just another added perk. Right, let's dip back to the lounge. Let us know what you thought about the session as well in the chat, just in the closing minutes before Sorry about the problem with that microphone. Yet again, I don't know what's been going on tonight. It's gone off a few times. I will look into that when I get the chance to. So just a final thanks to you all for being here tonight. Hit the notification bell and keep your eye on the community chat to find out when there's new content coming out during the week. We'll see what the next few days bring us between now and then. Have yourselves a very good evening. Enjoy the rest of your night. And my left eye, I'll be seeing you soon. Take care. One more shout out to the members.